right. Ready to really sink our teeth into this vampire deep dive?
I'm ready when you are.
You've sent over, honestly, some really fascinating research on vampire myths, like from all over the world. And it's clear you're ready to, like, ditch the whole Dracula thing and dive into some seriously obscure lore, which I'm totally here for, by the way.
I think you're going to be surprised by what we find, honestly.
I'm hoping so. So we're taking inspiration from an episode of this YouTube channel, Leyendas Legendarias. It's called Vampiros en todas partes, which basically translates to vampires everywhere. Catchy, right?
I've seen that one. They get into some seriously obscure stuff.
Exactly. And they don't hold back. So to kick things off, I think we should talk about the Ashanti people of Ghana. They have this, it's a whole mythology built around several different vampire-like creatures.
It's a great example of how these myths really reflect the culture's deepest fears.
Right. So we got the Obaifo to start with. They're kind of like living vampires, but there's a catch, right?
The Obaifo aren't acting on their own. They're actually controlled by witches.
Oh, now that just adds a whole other layer of creepy to it.
It's a fear of the supernatural, for sure, but also a fear of what humans are capable of, you know?
Definitely. Okay, so then there's the Asanbosum and the Sasabonsum. And these guys, they're the real deal, right?
Those are more like forces of nature, totally monstrous.
And they're described in some pretty vivid detail, like in the lore. The Asanbosum, for example, they've got these iron teeth and hooked feet so they can hang upside down.
Just like bats. Right.
Exactly, like bats. And we all know what bats mean in vampire stories.
It's that instant association with darkness, blood, the unknown.
Exactly. And then you've got the Sasabonsum, which is like, if the Asanbosum wasn't scary enough, imagine a vampire bat, but with like a 6-meter wingspan.
It's basically a small airplane with fangs.
Right. That's terrifying.
And it wasn't just about seeing them either. The Ashanti people believed that even speaking the names Asanbosum or Sasabonsum could bring bad luck.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Just saying the name.
It was like they were afraid of even acknowledging their existence, you know? Like it might make them appear.
It makes you realize how real these myths were to them, you know?
Absolutely. And how powerful those beliefs were.
Okay. Well, from the forests of Ghana, let's jump across the world to Spain. The vampire legend gets a little unexpected there. So not your typical blood-sucking monster, huh?
Not exactly, no. The dip is really more of a threat to livestock than people.
Interesting. So why livestock? What's the, I don't know, the cultural significance there?
Well, think about it. For a village like Pratdip, back in the day, livestock were essential. Food, income, you name it.
Right, their livelihood.
Exactly. So the dip, in a way, represents that very real fear of losing everything.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's amazing how this creature, which is so different from like your classic vampire, it's still so connected to the village's identity.
They even named the village after it in a way, Pratdip.
Right. It's like they've embraced this weird little piece of their history.
They even have a dip monument, if you can believe it.
That's amazing. Okay, so from the livestock-loving dip of Spain, let's head over to the Philippines, where we've got the Manananggal gull. Now, this one's got a real tragic backstory, don't they?
Yeah, the Manananggal's origin story is definitely one of the more heartbreaking ones out there.
So tell me about it. It starts with the Canaries, right?
Right, and the Canaries, they're actually seen as benevolent spirits.
Really? So how do we get from, like, helpful spirit to, you know, terrifying monster?
Well, it all comes down to heartbreak. The Canaries is betrayed, usually by a lover, and the pain of that betrayal. That's what triggers the transformation into the Manananggal.
So it's like all that emotional pain, it manifests physically.
Exactly. And the transformation itself is pretty dramatic.
How so? What happens?
Imagine the Canaris, who up until now has been this beautiful, often human-looking spirit. Suddenly, their body splits in half at the waist.
Wait, they split in half?
Yep. And the top half, it sprouts bat wings, fangs, the whole works. It's pretty intense.
It sounds terrifying, honestly. So we've got this, like, beautiful woman who transforms into a monster.
And not just any monster, but one that specifically preys on men.
Right, I was just about to say, there's definitely a theme here, isn't there?
Absolutely. The Manananggal, it's not just a scary story. It reflects a lot of the anxieties, especially around female sexuality and power.
So like a reflection of deeper societal issues.
Exactly. Folklore has a way of doing that, you know. It acts as a mirror to the culture.
That's fascinating. Okay, let's shift gears again, this time over to China, where we've got the Jiangshi, which is a vampire with, shall we say, a unique look and an even more unusual way of getting around.
The Jiangshi definitely stands out, even in the world of vampires.
So more hopping than flying then. That's definitely different.
Right. Not exactly the most intimidating way to get around. And get this, they're not even after blood.
No. What are they after then? What are the genes you want?
They're trying to absorb your ki. It's like the life force that flows through everything in Chinese cosmology.
Okay, so they're not out for blood, but they're still trying to steal your essence, basically.
In a nutshell, yeah. And it all ties back into that idea of balance, yin and yang, the Jiangshi. They represent an imbalance. They're stuck between worlds.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And look, it's all about that rigidity too, right?
Totally. King dynasty clothing, stiff limbs, like they're frozen in time.
It's both creepy and kind of comical.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Like imagine this stiff figure hopping towards you with its arms outstretched.
Okay, yeah, I can see the humor in that.
And of course, they've got their weaknesses. Black dog blood, for one.
Makes sense. Dogs are often seen as guardians against evil spirits.
Right, and peachwood, especially swords made of peachwood, those are supposed to be super effective.
I'm sensing a theme here with the wood.
And here's the weirdest one. Sticky rice.
Wait, like what you get with your Chinese takeout?
The one and only. It's supposed to slow them down because they get obsessed with counting each grain.
Okay, that's just bizarre, but also kind of brilliant.
Right. It's a good reminder that these myths, they can be weird and funny, but they're also rooted in real cultural beliefs.
Totally. Speaking of pop culture, didn't the Jiangshi have like a whole moment in Hong Kong cinema?
Oh, yeah. In the 80s and 90s, they were everywhere. Mr. Vampire, Encounters of the Spooky Kind, classics.
I'll have to check those out. Okay, so from hopping vampires in China, let's travel to a place with a more, shall we say, seductive side to their vampire lore. The Scottish Highlands, home of the B.A.N.D.I.T.S.
Now, the B.A.N.D.I.T.S, they're definitely in a league of their own.
In what way? Tell me more.
Well, they appear as these incredibly beautiful women, right? Often in long green dresses, very alluring.
Okay, so far, not so scary. What's the catch?
Well, they prey on lonely travelers, especially men who are far from home.
So they use their beauty as a weapon, basically.
You could say that. They lure men in, often with the promise of dancing, and then...
And then what?
Let's just say you don't want to get too close. You might notice their true nature hidden beneath those beautiful gowns.
And what is their true nature?
Deer hooves.
Whoa. Okay, that took a turn.
Yeah, they're not afraid to get a little monstrous when they need to.
And that's not all, right? They can shape-shift, too.
Oh, absolutely. Wolves, ravens, you name it. It's all about blurring the lines,
Yeah.
between human and beast.
Very unsettling. It's interesting how these creatures often represent, like, the specific fears of the culture they come from.
Right. And the B.A.N.D.I.T.S, they play on those very human fears of loneliness, desire, the unknown.
And like many creatures of the Fae, they've got a weakness.
Iron.
Ah, yes. The classic vampire vulnerability. No iron supplements for these ladies.
Right. It's amazing how that one detail connects to such ancient beliefs about iron,
It's like a direct line to those early days of ironworking when it was seen as this powerful force against evil.
So fascinating. Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground here, from Africa to Asia to Europe. But before we wrap things up, we have to touch on the Americas. There are vampire-like creatures there too, right? Oh, absolutely. They might not be as well known as their European counterparts, but they're definitely out there.
So give me some examples. What kind of creatures are we talking about?
Well, in Mayan mythology, you've got the Camazotz. It literally means death bat, so that gives you a pretty good idea.
Okay, yeah, that sounds pretty vampire-esque. What about others?
And then there's the Aztec Suatiteo. They're spirits of women who died in childbirth.
Wow, that's a really specific and kind of sad origin story. How does that connect to vampires?
Well, remember how vampires are often seen as these beings trapped between life and death?
Right, that liminal space.
Exactly. And women who died in childbirth, they were seen as occupying that same kind of space. Revered, but also feared.
Because they didn't quite belong to either world anymore.
Right. The Aztecs believed they could steal children, bring illness, that kind of thing.
It's fascinating how these beliefs about death and the supernatural manifest in such different ways across cultures.
Isn't it? And it just goes to show the vampire myth, it's not just one thing. It's this incredibly adaptable story. It reflects our deepest fears and anxieties no matter where we come from.
It's a reminder that there's always more to learn, more to explore when it comes to these creatures of the night. So the next time you encounter a vampire, whether it's in a book, a movie, or even just a conversation like this, take a moment to really think about what it represents. What fears or anxieties is it tapping into? And why do you think these stories continue to fascinate us? even after all this time. Well, on that note, we're going to have to wrap things up for today. But we want to hear from you. What are some of your favorite vampire myths? Head over to social media and share your thoughts using the hashtag #TheDeepDive. Until next time, happy exploring.